Welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking the incredibly gritty, completely chaotic, and honestly pretty unbelievable life of Joe Eszterhas. Now, even if that name doesn't immediately ring a bell, I guarantee you absolutely know his work. He's the screenwriter behind some massive cultural touchstones like the iconic thriller Basic Instinct. And what we're going to do today, pulling right from his deeply revealing sit-down on the Joe Rogan experience, is explore how a desperate immigrant background, real-world trauma, and some of the craziest historical encounters imaginable all fueled Hollywood's darkest, most successful scripts. So let's jump right in.
We're starting off with this heavy confession straight from Eszterhas himself. I mean, wow, right? It perfectly sets up the psychological engine driving his massive creative success. He talks very openly about compartmentalizing his creativity. He actually credits his darkest, most provocative, and sexually explicit writing to an invisible alter ego he calls the twisted little man. It's just a fascinating, kind of brilliant way to process life experiences that were, quite frankly, way too heavy for one person to carry on their own.
Because Eszterhas's life is defined by this massive, almost incomprehensible contrast. Picture this. On one side, you've got his origins. He arrives in America in 1956 as a Hungarian refugee. He's living in extreme poverty in Cleveland, getting into some pretty severe juvenile trouble, and eventually working a wildly violent police beat. But then, on the flip side, look at his ultimate destination. He reaches the absolute pinnacle of the Hollywood elite. We're talking 18 produced films and selling scripts for a record-breaking $3 million. So how exactly do you bridge that gap? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Let's start with Section 1, Refugee to Police Reporter, The Crucible of Cleveland.
If you trace his trajectory, you can see a man chasing the American dream through sheer, unadulterated grit. You know, he didn't take the cozy, traditional film school route, not at all. He started out in Austrian refugee camps before his family finally made it to a dirt-poor neighborhood in Cleveland. He was basically a self-taught kid just trying to master English, who managed to become a local police reporter in the late 60s. That gig eventually propelled him into national journalism at Rolling Stone magazine in the 70s, right at the absolute height of the Cultural Revolution. And all of that was the bedrock for his massive Hollywood success in the 80s and 90s.
But here's the absolutely crucial thing to understand. His time as a police reporter wasn't just a day job. It was a front-row ticket to visceral human tragedy. And the trauma started really early. At just 12 years old, looking out his living room window at a local bar, he watched a man get stabbed to death. Later on, as a reporter, he'd walk into a murder-suicide in Dayton where the victim's mother was wailing in Hungarian, which was Eszterhas's native tongue. At one point, he literally wet his pants hiding behind a car tire during a massive urban shootout in Cleveland, stuck right between a Hungarian cop he knew and a black nationalist leader he used to drink beer with. I mean, this is the dark, completely unfiltered reality that permanently scarred and shaped his psyche.
Moving on to Section 2, The Twisted Little Man, Channeling the Darkness.
So how did he handle all that intense trauma? Basically by splitting it off. Remember that twisted little man we talked about earlier? That's his dark, invisible alter ego. And Eszterhas describes this guy as being perpetually 29 years old. Whenever his writing got dark, whenever it dove into those twisted, dangerous intersections of sex and violence that made his thrillers so famous, Eszterhas claims he just stepped back and gave this alter ego the space to work. It's an incredible psychological tool. It allowed him to channel all those inner demons right onto the page without letting them totally destroy his everyday life.
And a lot of those demons and specific character traits were formed really early on through some highly formative relationships. Get this, as an 18-year-old, totally green, shy immigrant kid, he had a profound affair with a 39-year-old faculty member's wife. She was brilliant, beautiful, sassy, and totally unapologetic about her sexuality. That intense, real-world experience became the exact blueprint for the iconic, unarmored women that would later completely dominate his most famous films.
Which brings us to Section 3, Companions on the Fringe, Rock Stars and Renegades.
Now, during all this, Eszterhas somehow found himself embedded in an unbelievable network of cultural icons. The stories are wild. He interviewed the legendary Otis Redding until like 3:30 in the morning, sharing drinks and deep stories, only to wake up the very next day and see the wire machine reporting Redding's fatal plane crash. He interviewed a young Jimi Hendrix at 9:30 a.m., got high with him, and then casually took him to a local Hungarian joint in Cleveland to eat chicken paprikash while little old ladies asked the rock god for autographs. And then, of course, there was his deep friendship with the legendary Gonzo journalist himself, Hunter S. Thompson.
What's absolutely incredible here is that Hunter S. Thompson wasn't just some wild drinking buddy for Joe. He was the literal bridge to Eszterhas's Hollywood fortune.
Hunter read a piece Joe wrote about a Hell's Angels shootout and personally reached out. From there, Thompson pulled Joe right into the chaotic vortex of Rolling Stone magazine, hooked him up with a top-tier literary agent for his book, which then caught the eye of United Artists. So literally, all that explosive, drug-fueled Gonzo energy directly paved the way for Joe to start writing screenplays. It's crazy how that works out.
All right, Section 4, Creating Basic Instinct, the Alchemy of a Thriller.
Okay, let's break down the exact cause and effect recipe of his creative process for this movie. Step 1. He takes the memory of that worldly 39-year-old woman from his college days and smashes it together with the memory of a potentially corrupt trigger-happy cop he used to drink with back in Cleveland. Step 2. He flies off to Hawaii completely alone, spends 13 days baking in the sun, listening to the Rolling Stones on an absolute loop, fueled heavily by cocaine. Step 3. He finishes the script. Originally, he called it Love Hurts, but literally, as he's walking out the door to mail it, the twisted little man tells him, no, change it to Basic Instinct. And finally, Step 4. The result is a total industry earthquake. It sparks a bidding war that lands him a record-shattering $3 million.
And speaking of Basic Instinct, get this, 15. That is the number of times Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his wife reportedly watched the movie together while they were recording. It's just a bizarre, hilarious piece of trivia, but it perfectly shows the absolute global reach of this film. Think about it. From a gritty Cleveland memory to a script banged out in 13 days in Hawaii to becoming a global cultural staple. Just wild.
Let's head into Section 5, Surviving the Darkness, Cancer and Faith.
So what happens when a guy living this hard, this fast, finally hits a wall? What happens when you face your own mortality? For Eszterhas, it brought an incredibly abrupt turning point. After moving out of Malibu and back to Ohio, seemingly having conquered the world, he was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. The doctors were blunt: quit drinking and smoking immediately, or you are going to die.
He faced extreme surgery. They literally had to rebuild his throat using muscle from his neck. He immediately dropped his lifelong vices. And it was in that terrifying, quiet space of recovery, where he actually couldn't even speak for a long time, that he experienced a profound spiritual awakening. He started reading voraciously and ended up converting to Christianity. But true to form for Joe Eszterhas, his version of faith was incredibly specific and deeply rooted in his own gritty, street-level perspective.
And as you'd expect, there was immediate tension with this new faith. Eszterhas didn't find some sanitized, pristine figure to worship. He connected with the historical Jesus of Nazareth, a revolutionary guy who hung out with outcasts, tax collectors, and prostitutes, the lowest of the low. But when Eszterhas tried to write Christian screenplays with this gritty, realistic angle, Hollywood completely rejected them. They wanted safe. One producer even outright told him the script needed more incense to inspire people. Eszterhas's response? He said, "I don't write incense, I write flesh and blood."
And that visceral connection to flesh and blood perfectly explains his deep fascination with the Shroud of Turin. Whether modern science debates it as a 14th century fake or an unexplained 1st century artifact, Eszterhas is just moved by the sheer mystery of it. I mean, it behaves inexplicably like a 3D photographic negative created hundreds of years before photography even existed, lacking any clear brushstrokes or dye. For a man who built his entire life and career writing about the raw, physical reality of the human body, this artifact is the perfect intersection of deep, mysterious faith and visceral, unexplainable physical reality. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought. When you step back and look at the towering success of Joe Eszterhas, and you trace the wild, traumatic, and excessive path it took to get there, you really have to wonder, does creating great, enduring, and truly dark art inherently require a foundation of intense, real-world suffering? Could he have written a $3 million thriller without that twisted little man inside him? It's something to think about. Thanks so much for hanging out.